Hi, and welcome to the MZC1 recorded webinar on brain research. This is Dr. Daphne Wiles, and I'm one of the course mentors for MZC1. There are three learning objectives for brain research, which is part of Chapter 6. The first is to be able to determine an appropriate application of a given article on brain research for classroom practice. So you want to be able to take what you read about brain research and apply it to classroom practice. You also want to be able to analyze current brain research in relation to established theories in educational research and be able to determine possible implications of brain research for your classroom teaching. We're going to discuss some of the main points from brain research. We're able to see and learn a lot more about the brain due to brain imaging. And functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, is used to show us pictures of the brain and the brain structures as they are engaged in different activities. So you have two hemispheres. The left hemisphere of your brain is primarily used for language, while the right hemisphere is used for more spatial and nonverbal information. And research has shown that both hemispheres are usually used in most tasks. Now, your brain capacity, they've learned, is not set at birth, but instead is influenced by your early experiences. So you have, when you are born and you start to develop as a young child, you start developing these neural connections. And the stimulation in your early development is related to the number of neural connections that you actually establish. Those neural connections are the basis for higher learning and memory throughout your lifetime. So up until about 18 months of age, you tend to generate millions and millions of neural connections, just lots and lots of them. But after 18 months, you start doing this pruning. So you start cutting out those neural connections that are not used very often or not used at all. And what this does is it helps you to be more efficient and organized with your cognitive processes because you are pruning out the things that aren't used, and that allows those connections that are used to be strengthened. Your environment plays a huge role in how many connections you establish, and then also how that pruning occurs, and then really in strengthening the connections that are there. So as a person gains in knowledge or skill, his or her brain becomes more efficient. And we can tell this because when we use fMRI, different areas of your brain light up as you engage in different tasks. And the more areas that are lighting up, that means that those areas of your brain are working. And that requires energy to be able to do that. So as you become more efficient, then not as many areas are lighting up, meaning it's less work for you to do this. Now, automaticity is when you do something that is seemingly effortless, and that's because you have practiced it many times and you are very efficient. Not very many areas of your brain light up when you're doing something automatically like that. But we've learned through research that students who have learning disabilities often have less efficient brain processes. And this is very important as a classroom teacher to understand that that automaticity is a little more difficult for students who have learning disabilities. And so while your student who does not have a learning disability might only have a couple areas of his or her brain lighting up when engaged in a classroom task, your student who has a learning disability might have many more areas lighting up, which means they are doing much more cognitive work to accomplish the same goals as their peers who don't have a learning disability. And so that's just important to remember that these students are actually doing more work with their brain, and so we can't tax them with keeping up at the same rate on all of their tasks as their peers who don't have learning disabilities. When you think about applications of brain research to a classroom setting, there are some things we need to remember. One is that not all learning is equally likely. Research has shown that some things are very easy for our brains to remember, such as language, the natural number system, and living versus non-living things. But there are other things that are not as easy for our brains to remember and learn. And those are things such as fractions, algebra, and Newtonian physics. So really, when you go to teach a subject, there's a reason why some subjects seem more difficult than others. It's because your brain actually has more difficulty processing some information than other information. We also learned that brain development constrains cognitive outcome. And a quote from the book says, behavior change through learning cannot exceed the developmental status of the neural structure. So this just means that your brain has to be developmentally ready to take in and learn and retain new information, which is really relates back to what Piaget said when Piaget said that development needs to occur before learning can occur. Some regions of the brain might be particularly important for cognitive outcomes and supporting certain sorts of neural activities related to learning and cognition. So this is just saying that parts of your brain are very important for learning and cognition. And one part is your prefrontal cortex, which is your center of deliberate cognitive activity, which is your ability to act rationally. So your ability to inhibit impulses, weigh consequences of decisions, prioritize, strategize. These are all skills that are very important for students in school, and we have to realize that that prefrontal cortex that helps regulate these ideas, that doesn't stop developing until well into adulthood. So we can't look at our young students that we're teaching and expect them to be able to inhibit their impulses and prioritize and strategize and be able to weigh their consequences of their behavior, because that prefrontal cortex is still developing. So those are things that they are still learning. Okay, if you have any questions about brain research, please feel free to email a course mentor at our shared email box, which is edpsych@wgu.edu. Thank you.